We begin a new book, the book of Leviticus. The first Torah portion is called Vayikra, which means to call out. God is calling out to Moses. Moses, we know, is the most humble of all men. He was able to minimize his ego, to be the most humble of all people, such that he could have the closest relationship to God of all people. Somewhere in that minimization of self, in that giving himself over to God, in that recognizing that he is a messenger and he is here to do God's will, he was able to have that very close relationship that no other person will ever have. However, we can learn from Moses, and we can see that a minimization of ego, being humble, is an important character trait. That doesn't mean that we don't know what we're good at. It doesn't mean that we sit in the corner like a schmatter. It means that we recognize that God has given us gifts and talents and abilities that we can use in the world for good. The korbanos, the offerings, the quote-unquote sacrifices that Jewish people were to bring to the newly inaugurated tabernacle, which we read about last week, these offerings, their animals, their meal offerings, were in order to create a relationship with God. The word korban, offering, sacrifice, has at its root the word korev, to come close to God by bringing something of themselves, by in some level bringing themselves up in that desire to have a relationship with God, that their offerings were able to create the godliness that inhabited the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So too, we don't have sacrifices anymore. We're not bringing korbanos in the temple. But what we're bringing is the substitute for that, which is our prayers, our Torah learning, our mitzvot, all the connections that we do by lighting Shabbos candles and having a Pesach Seder and eating matzah on Passover, all the things that God commands us to do as ways to connect to the divine. Rabbi Nachman says, have you looked at the sky today? Have you looked up? Have you recognized that a foundational relationship that we have as living people is our relationship with God? Recognize that, as the people did in the desert, where they were given the possibilities of bringing their animals and bringing their offerings to the tabernacle to connect themselves to God, we have substitutes for that. We have prayer, we have Torah learning, we have acts of kindness and acts of goodness. And when we imitate God and we are like God, we do the things that we understand God does, visit the sick and bury the dead and comfort the mourners and clothe the naked, and all the things that God does in our Torah and in our understanding as we learn more and more about who God is in the world. When we imitate God and we become partners with God and we imitate God, then we will be the source for bringing that light into the world. And that is our job in this world. So have you looked at the sky today?